Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. So today we will be talking about different project management approaches. Now when I say project management approaches, I refer to the management style of a project, how it might differ depending upon certain key characteristics. So on the far left, I'm going to describe a very commonly known approach, that is predictive approach. Sometimes you might be referring to this as traditional as well. And on the far right, we will talk about adaptive approaches, or commonly referred to as agile approaches. Now, first thing that we want to highlight as a difference between the two approaches is predictive is plan driven, meaning that we are usually expected to prepare a detailed plan upfront in the project life cycle, and the teams are expected to simply follow that plan, execute the work, and get the results. Basically, the overall scope is well defined in the beginning itself, and the degree of changes expected in the scope are very less. So it is safe to plan most of the things in detail and execute the work in an appropriate manner. On the other hand, we have adaptive approaches, which are commonly referred to as change driven also, because in these approaches we expect a lot of scope changes, usually because the scope is not clearly defined in the starting, and it is expected that the customer expectations, the requirements, the scope is going to evolve as the project progresses. So it doesn't make sense to do high amount of upfront planning when your scope is not clear, because the moment your scope gets refined or evolved, the plans would become useless and you will have to sit down and replan everything. Hence, agile approaches, adaptive approaches, they rely on very little upfront planning, and usually they prefer to plan on the go. As the scope becomes more and more clear, they continue planning the work on the go. Now, another difference we can highlight is usually predictive approaches are linear in their style of working, meaning they will go in a sequential manner, step by step. Like, for example, if I take an example of a construction project, it will start with maybe a feasibility study. Then once that's concluded, then there will be a proper design phase. Then after that, maybe there will be a procurement phase, then the construction phase, and then the handover. So the final output is delivered towards the end of the project. Whereas adaptive approaches are usually iterative and incremental in nature, meaning, first of all, let's understand the two terms separately. Iterative means doing something again and again with the objective of refining it, making it better with every iteration, with every repetition. Incremental, on the other hand, means delivering small outputs throughout the time period instead of delivering one single large output towards the end. So when it comes to adaptive, they are both iterative and incremental, meaning they will be prioritizing to deliver small outputs throughout the project in an incremental manner. But at the same time, with each increment, they will also be looking to incorporate the feedback, refine their increments as they move forward through an iterative approach. So they are both iterative and incremental in nature. Now, what factors will help you determine that which type of project management approach is suitable for your specific project? See, number one, I hope this is something that you might have already picked up. We need a well defined scope for a predictive approach. That's, you can say, the foundation, or that's a prerequisite, that until unless you don't have a well defined scope, there is no way that you can do a proper planning. And another very important factor to consider is relevant experience. Like, we should have a lot of similar projects that the team has worked on in the past. So they should have complete, you can say, in and out understanding of how this type of project has to be executed, what could be the shortcomings, what could be some of the common pitfalls that they should be prepared for. So these two, you can say, are my primary factors. Of course, there can be many more, but for this video, we'll just limit it to these two. And of course, if the scope is not well defined, or in other words, we know that scope is evolving, and usually the type of work going to do is something that we haven't done in the past, or we have little relevant experience. So either one of them or both of them, if true, would make your project a good candidate for adaptive approaches. Now, as you all would agree, that there has been a lot of hype around adaptive agile approaches, especially in last decade or so. And somewhere, in my opinion, people have sort of generalized that agile is the new preferred project management approach that everyone should follow. However, that's not correct. If I can properly plan something in advance in detail, then obviously I'm going to make sure that my cost, time, resource utilization is optimized through proper planning as much as I can. So, if the scope is clear, we have the experience, then why not? Why not will you follow a predictive approach? Because that approach will give you the best result, not just in terms of getting the output, but also, like I said, making sure that you can get the project output with the least amount of time, money, and resources. However, yes, if I do not have a clear understanding of the scope, and or the experience required is not there, or we haven't done similar type of work in the past, this is a completely new type of project that we are working on, then obviously I have to take an adaptive approach. And in this, definitely there would be a lot of rework that we have to do. Maybe some things that we have already done may have to be scrapped based on the feedback we receive. So there will be a lot of undoing, redoing, reworking in this type of approach. So usually what we see is, when it comes to tangible world like construction, it is more appropriate to follow a predictive approach, because there, if I go and try to undo and redo some already completed work, it would lead to huge amount of wastage, environmental damage, and cost escalations. So think of it in this way, that I'm doing a construction project and I'm erecting a pillar, and after I've erected the pillar, the customer comes and says, "Oh, I don't like it here, it is obstructing my view." Can you shift it to the left or to the right? Okay, I can, but should I really do that? I mean, imagine the amount of wastage we are going to create with that feedback if it gets implemented. So usually in tangible world, because the cost of rework is very very high, you will want to plan and execute things in a very detailed manner, which is what predictive does. However, when you go to intangible world like software development, website designing, or marketing, digital marketing campaigns, these kind of projects, now over here the cost of rework is not very high. So even if we end up doing something that isn't meeting the customer expectation, going back and undoing and redoing it should not lead to a huge amount of cost escalation or um, delays or any other repercussions. It can be something that we can manage within our constraints. So that's one way of summarizing it, but I'm not saying that it should be hard and fast, that this is how it should be, but a lot of times this is what we observe. And of course, to end this, we also have hybrid. Now, most of the projects that we see in today's world are actually hybrid, knowingly or unknowingly, but they are hybrid. Hybrid means that it could be different types of hybrid. Like it could be a hybrid where we have some scope of work done using predictive. Parallelly, some scope of work is done using adaptive. So they are going in parallel. Another type of hybrid could be that we start off with adaptive. Once we have a solid understanding, then we shift to a predictive approach. And a third type of hybrid could be that we start off with predictive and then we move on to adaptive. Now I can give you a couple of examples for them. Like for the first one, predictive and adaptive going on in parallelly. An automotive company who's developing a new model of a car, the the body, the seats, the engine, these components might will or should get developed using predictive approach, but parallelly there would be sensors and software components that controls a lot of things within the car in modern cars. So those components can be developed using adaptive and they can go hand in hand parallelly. For the second one, there could be an example where we are experimenting with, let's say, we are a restaurant chain and we are experimenting with our menu and cuisines. So it's an iterative and incremental approach that we can start with. And once we have got a significant amount of confidence that yes, this menu, this cuisine is what really is looking promising, then we can scale it up to all our 20-25 chains in a predictive manner. For the third one, we can say, let's take an example where we are going to maybe set up a data center. Now, when you talk about a data center, the 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 physical aspect of it, the tangible part of it, the construction, the racks, the ventilation, and all these things, they will go and get done in a predictive with a predictive approach. But as that is done and we start moving the equipments and we have the data center coming together, and we also now need to have some kind of softwares to be designed and developed so that the teams can access the data from that data center. So then that can be developed using adaptive approach. So in this way there could be multiple types of hybrid possibilities that may exist. I hope the explanation was clear enough to differentiate between the three approaches. That's all for today's video. Hope you liked it. Bye.